Good evening YouTube, my name's Sean Connors and this is Outsiders, and welcome back to my channel. And this evening I'm going to be doing a video that is not part of the advanced video series. It's just a video that somebody's asked for, so I thought, well, it's only courteous to supply what they want, and that was Atari67, who's asked about Pathfinder. Now I'm assuming from the question this is about DMing Pathfinder rather than actually playing it. That would be a different can of worms. It would all automatically depend on what you want to play, and then obviously I could give you some advice on that. But assuming it's DMing Pathfinder, some simple tips to running that game. Well, I think the first thing is to have a look at the book. So obviously it's quite a meaty tome, as we've already done in a previous video, and it's clearly a book that I'm going to use the word a lot in videos moving forward. It's crunchy. It's got a lot of bits. Now that by definition tells you something as a GM, that this is a book that is going to be a long read. There's a lot of detail in here, and that means there's quite a lot of information to absorb. So you need to be prepared for that road. Not that it's unassailable, far from it. The good thing about any system, to be perfectly honest with you, is as long as you know your players, you know the campaign that you want to run, the game world that it's in, and you know the starting stories, effectively, of what you want to do, that in essence can give you a huge leg up into what information you're going to need. So for example, if you know the players, then that's going to give you the character classes. So that in its own right tells you something straight away. So if you've got fighter types, you're going to need to be familiar with the nuances of the combat rules that exist within Pathfinder. And because it's a game that's built off the third era products, if you've previously played any third edition or 3.5, it's going to be quite an easier transition. Apologise about the light in the background, something that's making me look like I've got a halo on my head, but I daren't turn the lights off at this time of the night. You wouldn't see me at all. Maybe that's better actually. Let's see if we can move slightly. There we go. That might make life a little bit easier, as it's a video request. I don't think it matters if we're a little bit unprofessional. So yeah, you need to be familiar with that, and also this sort of game is going to carry a battle grid, potentially miniatures. I personally I like miniatures a lot, but I actually quite like when I'm doing my Pathfinder games. I like to draw out as the game unfolds. I like to give the fog of war. I like drawing it out. I don't like to do it too much in advance, although that can help, and that's another tip you can use. You know, there are sections of it you can draw in advance on your battle map, or I like to have pieces of battle maps that I can put on the main battle map as I need them, so I keep these little separate bits that can be rubbed off. I find that really useful rather than having one big main map. It's just a little tip that I find really useful. And then of course I like to use tiddlywinks, different coloured ones, because I find them brilliant, you know, for the kobolds, goblins, orcs, whatever you're using. It's nice and simple. The players have their they can have their figures and you can just use these, and it's just as good as long as you've got, you know, good pictures and stuff to illustrate what the creatures are. I don't think the illusion or the fantasy is lost. It's perfectly fine. But a battle grid demands attention. You need to obviously absorb those rules, and yeah, you know, playing a good game will depend a little bit on the types of players you've got. If you've got players in your group who are very tactically minded, you're going to want to feel comfortable about the battle grid, what movement's available, what provokes attacks of opportunity to be. You don't want to slide down to a chess match. Thankfully, as it's only first level, you know, it's only so much access a first level character can have, and this is why it's so important to know the players. Equally, if you've got a spellcaster in the group that you're going to run a game for, or magic user and stuff, they're only going to have a very limited list, and obviously if you know the characters in advance, and that's another tip that I would ask you do, is get the characters rolled up in one session and spend a lot of time around the backstories. Have that as the prelude to the main campaign beginning, and then you've got that little bit of time to actually look at the characters and make sure that you're really familiar with the rules in this book that are going to be needed for the game that you're about to run. And you know, the characters will give you quite a few clues as to the way they're going to play. So if they take particular feats, then you're going to need to be certainly familiar with certain things. If those are going to come up, power attack as an example, cleave, maybe sunder rules, maybe ball rush. There's quite a few things, but the players will give you a heads up. And equally, the NPCs that you're going to use, they may have specific attacks and various uniquenesses that you will need to be familiar with. Now again, fortunately, there are multiple ways that you can get good with the rules. Either mark your book very carefully, you know, with different post-it notes, exactly where the rules are. But these days, like I've got right now that I'm using, the iPad's phenomenal. There are a number of reference tools out in the the iPad, and you can bookmark the pages, and at a glance you can quickly find any reference information you need. Even the players won't even know that you don't know. One of the keys, as you know, Atari, is the fact that if you can run a fairly smooth game without needing to resort to apparently looking at the rules, even though this is very crunchy, it really helps keep the game really flowing. And that's one of the tricks I love to use. And equally, it's also the fact that you can then sort of batten down the rules lawyers because you're so on top of it, which is the great illusion and the smoke and mirrors that you want to achieve. So, that's a little bit more. So it's those little things that will make the difference. Essentially, it's a role-playing game. It's a high fantasy role-playing game. The powers for the characters increase by the level. And again, because of the way it works for spells, generally it's not until you reach every odd number that most, not all, but most classes get quite a significant power boost. They move up to the next level slot. So, for example, magic users, they don't move up to their second level spells until their third level. Sorcerers don't move up to theirs till they're actually third. So there's time to get familiar around the spells, and again, the selections are quite low at the beginning. Magic items can equally throw up some pretty uniquenesses. If I can give you one simple tip around Pathfinder, the one that I use quite a lot is, as the DM, obviously one of the keys is don't give out too much. Keep it very low key, really. Sort of tips I would use just to keep things within balance and check is make it a world where it isn't as simple just to get hold of stuff. They have to work at it. Yes, there should be locations where they can go and they can do a bit of shopping as such, but it should be very tough, and they have to do all the role-playing stuff that goes in hand with that before they get it. And a little thing you can do is, like, every 4 levels, that's the maximum plus. So up to level 4, you're looking for about +1 weapons, from about 5 to a +2. That's simple analogy that you can use, and you can use that throughout. And I found that pretty invaluable when it comes to actually balancing it out and not giving out too much. And again, that will help keep everything in check for what you want. Effectively, you could give out loads of stuff that's very short range stuff, wands, potions, scrolls, anything that's going to burn off fast. You could be pretty loose and free with that. But everything else, I would, to be honest, I'd be quite hard on it, to be honest, and it won't do you any harm. As a game, as a system, it's very balanced. There's nothing really to be frightened of. The only thing I would personally say, that's my personal preference and the ones that most of my players talk about, is we found that one of the interesting problems with the system is if all the players are taking different classes in different careers, then it's fine, it balances itself out. If a few people aren't doing that, so if you've got 3 characters sticking to core class, whatever their core class is they're going to do, and everybody else is diluting the characters, it very much depends on how they're diluting, and has a huge impact on the balance of the game. And I hate to use the word balance because it's a horrible word really in role playing. In many ways, it's just a horrible word to throw out, but it is something you have to account for as the GM. That's your job. Is that, and primarily that the role of a GM is to entertain. That's the premise of being a good GM. Good tools. There's no doubt about it. It's a solid engine, but it's it's a very crunchy system. It's right up there with the sort of, I would call it the super fantasy games. It's really quite a really powerful, a very powerful system in terms of what this system really puts the onus on the players. The players are very much in control because it's very heavy rules based. It's not a system that lets you make serious tweaks to it. Yes, you can make some. You can make changes on how hit points are rolled. You can make changes on certain access to certain things if you want to, but you have to be quite careful at anything you put in that could have a ripple later, and those ripples can have a huge impact on your campaign. So again, what I would suggest is that you run it as is. I wouldn't use any splat books, just use the core books, and I'll very quickly explain this. I have done in a previous video. This is just really for your benefit. Is that if you use the core books, they've had the most amount of playtime. They were heavily beta tested. They were very heavily play tested over 2 years. But the splat books come after the playtesting, and they do not have that playtesting in there at all. So the balance are all over the place. But if you stick to the core books, trust me. I mean, we've run a lot of Pathfinder games, and I've run them for a number of groups, and we've not even scratched the surface of the combinations that you can pull out of the bag with this. It's really very good. It's pretty unlimited, and I think as a GM, you can have a lot of fun around this book. I think definitely you'd want to get hold of at least the first bestiary book to go with the Pathfinder book if you don't already have it. or at least, as a cheaper option, download it maybe from RPG. Drivethrough.com would be a good way of getting hold of the bestiary, because it'd probably be about a third of the price, to be honest. Because it's really needed. It's just very handy reference tool, and again, if you download it, you can bookmark the creatures ahead of the game, because you know what's coming, and that can equally save you time as the GM when you're running the game. I like to spend as little time. This is a game that could easily suck away, rather than thinking about the stories. You can spend more time thinking about what's going to come up in terms of abilities and stuff like that, and that's really frustrating. And it's one of the reasons why I'm desperate to push some of my groups away from Pathfinder to try other things out, to actually, I'm not trying to be horrible to the audience around me, but I want to try and flesh them out to do other things, to find out if there is other areas that they would explore, and you can't do that sitting in the same system. So Pathfinder, a lot of positives. I mean, there's not much more I can tell you about it really. No more real pitfalls. I mean, keep it specific to the book, try and stick there. I think personally, one of my favourite little tips for just to keep things really easy is that I would. A couple of things I've recently done with Pathfinder that work very well is, the way we do it is that you get, like it says in the book, maximum hit points to start. Don't do the point buy system. That's one thing I would urge you to do. Do the old-fashioned style, roll the characters up, do it all in front of you. Be quite hard on the rolling up system. Maybe 46 7 times, drop the lowest stat, that sort of thing. 46 take the best 3, drop the lowest 1. That sort of thing will work very well. This maximum hit points at first level, and then after that, you and the player roll the hit points. Whoever gets the highest, that's the number they take. That works very fair. We found that works very, very fair, and balances quite nicely. The lower hit point people generally get a better average hit points. The higher hit points people do need those extra hit points, because they're the ones taking the frontline action. So that seems to work. Another tip that I've used that works very well for Pathfinder, and I'm going to have to start bringing this quite quickly to a close. I don't want to go on too much longer with this, which is just to give you a heads up and a pointer. Is that I also made all the characters roll percentile dice, like the old school style, to go alongside their main stats, and then every level they go up, rather than getting a stat point every 4 levels as per the Pathfinder book, what I was doing is actually they'd have a percentile score. So let's say they had 1750 strength, for example. Every level you get 50 advancement points except the first. So at second level you get 50 advancement points, but it's going to only be spent on those percentiles. But you can only put a maximum of 25 into any one percentile score. The rest can be divided however you want. That's worked really, really well. It generally means that if you look at it logically, you're still going to need 4 levels to get a stat point, but it might be early on you get a couple of stat points quicker. It really worked very well. It's a really nice little thing, and that's something I'm throwing out there for Pathfinder, because I found it really useful, to be perfectly honest with you. So yeah, in essence, a little recap around how to actually play stroke DM Pathfinder, and hopefully you'll find that of some use. I would like to go on further, but I'd need more specifics at this point, and if anybody else has any more questions around running a Pathfinder game, feel free to drop me a line, and if it's a really good relevant question, I'll be happy to do a video response for you. I hope you found that of some use, and for those that you're out there already running Pathfinder, feel free to chip in any videos that you want to attach to this to help out Atari 67 in his GMing, any tips you might have. Anyway, I've been Sean Connors, this has been Outsiders. Till the next time, take care of yourselves, and happy gaming. Bye bye.